anything to get me out.
Well, so it's an average, so it doesn't, from a big average, it doesn't show, it's like a yearly.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Okay.
6:01, I'll bring the Community and Economic Development Committee to order. And the first item on the agenda is the Comprehensive Plan Memorandum of Understanding. Mr. Peets is here. Come on up.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Todd Peets. I'm Director of Portage County Regional Planning Commission. I really didn't have much to say. I was here more for questions in case you had questions. The prosecutor's office was the one that reviewed the memorandum of understanding and also worked with your Frank Semino, and to verify that everything was in order, and they did. We did alter the budget amount to a lower number, which is probably, you probably prefer that. And we're really ready to go. We hired a new planner, so we now have 3 planners on staff, and we have 4 interns for the summer, so we can do quite a bit right now. And that's what, and we're starting this just when they got here, so that's great. The only other thing I want to add to that is I want to make sure that the council's involved, the many, I would like to see many city departments involved, as well as some of the volunteer boards and committees to be on a steering committee. And I was thinking maybe that would be every other month or every 2 months basically, as a progress thing. The other thing I'm really excited about is so there's the comp plan, and that goes on your website. That's great. What I'm excited about is the interactive version. I want that to be also something that serves the public. They can find out more information about their community and zoning and anything else that might be impacting them. But I would like to also be like a marketing document, a fun marketing document, and make it lively and talk about quality of life and things like that. And I want to work with Dennis too on that to make sure that we're including information about why should you locate here kind of thing. So that's the basic thing. That's the thing we want to use. We were talking about doing oral histories maybe in there, where people could talk about the schools or their parks or economic development or what they foresee for the future. I didn't plan on speaking too long though, so I was really just asking you guys if you had, or I'm really here to answer any questions you may have.
When do you anticipate a start date?
The day after you guys sign the memorandum of understanding.
And how long do you think it'll take to complete it?
We're calling it a year, but it might be less than that. It could be very much less than that, because we're starting to figure out how to streamline these things.
So would you recommend, like, some of, with this being started, with some of the maybe possibilities of businesses coming in, would we want to put any of them like on hold or not, how do I want to put this? Things that maybe would be questionable about where the placement of some of them would be located. With this being planned, would that be a legitimate reason to maybe put off some of these businesses that could be questionable in certain areas?
I'm not sure what the questionable businesses are.
There's
There's zoning laws, and they have a right to use the property per the zoning.
I understand.
Yes, but we could, as part of the discussion, talk about where should certain things be located, what kind of things do we want to see, in a different community, not from here, but we asked those questions. What would you most like to see from the community standpoint? And in that case, they needed a pharmacy, and they had 2 pharmacies 6 months later.
Well, and even with our downtown area as well, I mean, would that also detail our downtown area, the types of businesses that, would fit in the district in our downtown, there's been some rumors of some questionable businesses that I've heard that are trying to come in our downtown, and I just don't feel that that is going to attract an image that it's going against what we're trying to go for.
Yeah.
So with, Main Street and, their plan and this working, with this, are we able to, maybe hold off on some of that with that or no?
If these is a certain type of questionable businesses, you can always do a moratorium on those kind of businesses until you have more information.
Yeah.
that would probably just be safer than just saying we're gonna hold off, period. That's not gonna hold a lot of legal water.
Right, I
A
understand that.
moratorium, if it's something specific or a questionable group of things that you don't wanna see here, you could put a moratorium on there for further evaluation and make that part of the, how it turns out with the community meetings, with the public, with you guys, and how the comp plan shakes out. And then we can make, stronger recommendations of what should go there.
Okay.
And see, that's what we'd like to see, may have to modify the zoning to do that. But that's part of what the planning process is about.
Was there any, and I'm looking at Brimfield's plan there, so I'm assuming some of the information there is going to mirror, or not, the same concepts that are within that Brimfield plan we'll be taking for our own. So I guess my question is, the first intro background that you have on your existing conditions and trends for July and August, are there going to be updates that we will be brought in the loop on with some of those early, that early information?
Yeah. Like I mentioned, if we set up that steering committee, we'd be funneling you all that information before it really went public. It's still draft documents, and we could even do, in our kickoff meeting, we can even say which steps we're going to be doing and when we're going to be doing them, what to expect in the future meetings and stuff, like what you have done by those future meetings. And so you have a lot of choice there. The other thing too is, Gail's the mastermind behind the interactiveness, and she's trying to make everyone unique to the community that we do it for. So it's not going to be cookie cutter, because nobody really likes to be cookie cutter. And so we want to do that. I love your website now, where you have to fly over with the drone. I would love something like that as part of this as well, because I think that's a really cool photo. But we want to make it exciting. We want to make people say, "Hey, wow, I want to take another look at Ravenna," and talk about the positives specifically.
Okay. All right. And then on the formation of the steering committee, then, are you going to have recommendations around that, or is that at the kickoff meeting, then after it would be put together, or discussed?
I guess you can't approve this tonight anyway, so I can, by next week, I could get you a recommendation list of people who, kind of groups or committees that should be on there, and then you guys can make the decision on who you think is most appropriate.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Sorry, I know this was more on the MOU side that we're discussing, but.
No, I'm glad you're discussing it. Again, I'd rather have all your questions answered than go in with some questions that not be answered.
This question doesn't directly relate to our current comprehensive plan we're working on. I'm curious about these technical assistant hours that are incorporated in the plan. We have 150 hours used that comes out to about $10,000, about $70 an hour for each of those. It takes up all of the technical assistance hours from 22, 23, and 23, 24. Do those hours come to us because we're members of the regional planning? Okay, and so we do not have any additional hours available to us from the previous year of 21, 22. Did we lose them, or did we use them?
You use some of them. So in our bylaws, it states that all members are treated and how those hours are kept. So basically, you keep the previous year's hours that you haven't used. You get the current year, and in this case, because it's going to go into next year, we can take that. So the idea is trying to save you as much money as you can, because you are, as being members, you already paid for them.
Yeah.
So we're trying to give you that money back. So, and the other thing too is we won't start billing until those hours are used up. So,
Did we check to see if we had previous hours left from 21, 22?
I can look. We have all the history.
I mean, if we do, it's $70 an hour for any of those hours that we might have.
Yeah, so one of the problems we have is we have townships who never use their hours. And I beg and beg and beg for them to use them, because what are you getting if you're not using it, And so if I was to do that for everyone, some communities might have 600 unused hours,
Okay.
and then I got a budget,
Okay.
and I've got to bring money in, because memberships, just to be upfront, our memberships pay for 55% of our budget, so we have to make up the other 45%, and to make that up, we have to be innovative and try to do a product that people want, and I think that's what we're trying to do here with this plan.
I understand the policy completely. I'm just wanting to check to see if there's additional funds there. Of course, we'd like to use them. If that's already been done reflected in what's written in the section of 2.2, that's fine.
I can give you a history of how many hours you've been using,
Eh,
if you would like that.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay. Look at you, Rob, you always have questions.
No, I really don't. I'm just anxious to get the project started.
I'm anxious too. I think it's gonna be a really, what I think we can do with it now, I think it's gonna be really fun. I mean, it's gonna be really put the city on the map. It's, you know, and you're gonna have the, I tell this to all the ones, everybody we're doing it, because Gail wants to make them better and better and better and better. So yours would be better than the ones previously, but unfortunately, the ones after you will probably also be getting better. But that's okay. It's something that you don't have now, and it's better to have something.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Any other questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Todd, very much.
Thanks, Todd.
Look forward to working with you and getting this started. There's no management updates, so 6:12, we'll adjourn.
6:12, I'll start the Utility Committee. The first topic on the agenda will be from Mr. Remley pertaining to a water bill flyer. If you want to state your name and address at the microphone.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Moskin. I'm Dirk Remley. Tonight I'm Vice President of Main Street Ravenna. I live in Ward 4, Dr. or Mr. Kelfy's ward. In the previous months' committee meetings, it was raised that there was a concern with the Main Street Ravenna insert in the water bill. A couple of concerns were raised there, and at one point, Mr. Kluge charged a couple of officials with developing some policy language to address those concerns, among some other items within that dynamic. And so I'm here to talk about essentially developing that policy language and some things that council might consider as far as some suggestions within that discussion. Certainly, I would encourage posting the policy and guidelines on the water billing page online. It sounded like one of the concerns raised last month was that members of the public weren't aware that people, or I shouldn't say people, but community organizations can use the insert to publicize certain events, certain activities, and do some fundraising therein. And the various dynamics associated with including that insert that were raised in Mr. Reynolds' response to, I think, a message that Ms. Greger pointed out in asking for that opportunity. So posting all the information online and very accessible to the public, I think would help in a number of respects with that. And that will help to avoid confusion, and will also help community organizations understand parameters associated with using that opportunity as well, without, abusing the city's generosity with that particular practice. I'd also encourage following current practice as outlined in Mr. Reynolds' message. First, add some guidelines pertaining to content, purpose, and perhaps some limitations on frequency of usage per year. I make that statement, I put some of those guidelines, suggestions in the communique that I sent you previously. I don't want to redo all of that information, but just calling out particular points, summarizing some of those items. Also, Main Street Ravenna's insert facilitated a few purposes. One was to make the community aware of Main Street Ravenna and its mission, various things going on with Main Street Ravenna. Also, at one point, we called for volunteers. There was a full side dedicated to announcing upcoming events, activities, dates for that, scheduling for that. And then about a sixth of that entire insert was for a donation. And we've done that, Main Street Ravenna has done it in the past, as Mr. Karras noted in that last month's meeting. And a few people among us today have been involved with Main Street Ravenna and can recall that practice as well without incident in the past. So, follow up on that, on those practices, you can codify them perhaps to make them clearer perhaps. Again, the insert should, include helping readers understand how the organization benefits the community. It should not represent the organization's only fundraising effort. Again, in that message that I shared with you previously, this Main Street Ravenna does a number of other fundraising messages, mailers. So this was not the only effort to seek donations, but it's again, we're trying to utilize that opportunity that the city provides. And the city shows its support for these organizations by providing that particular opportunity. And again, hopefully the organizations are not abusing that particular opportunity. And there should be a limit on the number of times a single organization can use the billing insert in any given year. And that might depend on, again, that demand. I think somebody, I forget if it was Ms. Wood or Ms. West, who raised the concern about a lot of organizations wanting them to take advantage of that opportunity. And as far as I understand, there aren't many organizations that use it. Somebody noted that it's underutilized. But again, posting guidelines, policy online for the public to see and other organizations to see, that may increase demand for that opportunity. So these are some suggestions to help guide, I guess, policy language development. I've got a few notes as well to help address any questions that you've got that we derived from that message that I've already sent to you. I also wanted to mention that the city and the community organizations really cooperate with each other. Both are getting benefits from each other relative to the given activities and also the general support, implicit and explicit support. Just today, in fact, I teach at Kent State University, and Kent State University sent out an announcement basically for the United Way's Day of Care, which is coming up. They're seeking volunteers. In fact, there are a couple of volunteer opportunities within Ravenna relative to that. Also, the library is hosting a nonprofits meet and greet this Wednesday. So I'm sure there'll be some networking among nonprofits in there as well, in addition to seeking volunteers from the public as you respond to certain questions from people, residents interested in looking into nonprofit organizations. So again, there's a cooperative kind of dynamic across different nonprofits. If you've got any questions, I might be able to respond to them, or our Executive Director Harrison is here. Todd also has served as past president, so I'm sure he can respond to some questions as well if you have any.
What is the status of this group looking at a policy? I mean,
Last I spoke with Ms. Dubinsky, she was working on writing up a written policy, and then she was supposed to get it to us to look over.
us, all of us?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And have you provided that input to Ms. Dubinsky too?
I've only sent the message to Ms. Gregor, and she sent it to, so.
She has it, okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, I think this is more concern about something that's, in my opinion, not a big deal, but if it has to be formalized, that's fine. But I don't, I certainly don't think Main Street did anything wrong. And as you said, when I was on the board, we did similar things. And I think it was mostly about getting donations at that time, to be quite honest with you. But that's what your organization needs to do if it wants to stay solvent. The city contributes to Main Street and the chamber. They're good organizations we hope every resident supports.
And that kind of statement can be part of that information online, suggesting the city's commitment then to supporting community organizations that benefit the community generally.
Well, and I just want to clarify too, at the time that this came up and it was questionable, it wasn't so much the flyer insert, it was the misunderstanding of what was on the flyer. Because a couple of Main Street Ravenna's events are clean up Main Street, clean up downtown. And on the same page, it was asking for donations. So a lot of residents don't know the difference between Main Street Ravenna being a nonprofit organization and the city and it's coming in a water bill. So they thought and misunderstood that the city was asking for donations to clean up downtown. Those were the frantic calls that we were getting. It wasn't anything else, and we appreciate what Main Street does, as well as the chamber. But that is why we need a little bit more detail on policy, so that we don't have those misunderstandings and misinterpretations of things. So it was,
Again, publishing policy language and codifying some of these practices, I think would go a long way in addressing those concerns. Again, very valid concerns.
And I think also, since we've talked about it now publicly, making it, open to other nonprofits. If we're going to do for one, we need to be fair and give other people, because I think it's great. I think city and nonprofit collaborations do go hand in hand in making the community better. We do a lot with a lot of other, we work with the Boys and Girls Club, with the playground. We, did stuff with, Family Community Services, the veterans, United Way, it goes on and on, So I think that it gives a better statement, stronger together, if we allow everyone to do it. So since we kind of talked about it, I think that, having something in writing and a policy, then it's fair across the board. But I think too, it kind of got blown up, and unfortunately, some people saw it. It got posted on social media that we were asking for money to clean up Ravenna, and you can't be responsible how people perceive stuff. And you guys did go about it the right way. You guys didn't do anything wrong, and it was just, I think, a communication issue from the administration, and maybe a way how it could have been handled, maybe a little bit differently. But I think I've always said we need to link our website to use that to, connect some of our opportunities that we do have in our community. So.
No, one more point I would make is that with Main Street Ravenna's national accreditation, one of the criteria is that we have to show, all Main Streets have to show a, support from the city.
Yes.
And then that benefit to the community as well.
Right.
So this insert dynamic contributes to that evidence.
Goes along with the grants that you guys work with. It's all,
And I'll have to agree that communication is a key to many things, and that makes a big difference.
Thank you.
Okay, the next thing on the agenda is the contract with Carvo Companies for the water project on Meridian and Murray Streets. The contract would include replacing the water lines, fire hydrants, services, valves of, there are different sections on those two streets. Mr. Finney, could you clarify the exact areas on those two streets?
Murray is from Woodland to what's the first street? I drew a blank.
Sycamore?
No. No, no.
Which way, which way? No.
East. It's not, we're not going clear. Oak Manor, thank you. Thanks. And then Meridian is just tying over services. There's a small section of new line, but it's tying the services off of 4-inch, put them on the 8-inch. And then around the bend of Harris, there's a section of water line that we're going to connect on Sycamore. And this is OPWC grant.
Have the grants been awarded? Oh, okay, because it
We're
says
using it.
upon approval.
Well,
in this-
so technically, we're not able to start until the beginning of July. And that's typically when the state allows us to move forward.
Okay, but you've been given notice that
We can advertise, but we cannot officially award it. We cannot officially assign contracts until the state of Ohio tells us we can.
Okay, all right.
But to get ahead of the game, historically, this is the way we do it. So as soon as the state sends us that information, we can immediately sign a contract, and in the meantime, the contractor can order pipe, material, valves.
When we talked about it previously, you thought some of the work might get started this summer and then finish next year, right?
In this, I don't believe we have the pipe delay this year that we have in the past. I believe the manufacturers are able to stock up. We've actually tried to place an order, but there was three suppliers. One bought the others, now there's 2 suppliers. And they can control how much pipe is stocked. and
So the
price.
project might be completed this summer?
We're hoping, yes, we're
Oh,
hoping
wow.
it'll be, well, by Thanksgiving. It's always our goal to be done by Thanksgiving, so we can pave the road before the asphalt plant shut down.
Okay, if there are no other comments or questions pertaining to that, go to the next item on the agenda, which would be the wastewater treatment plant assessment. I know this has been brought up before, but there's a little bit more information this time. This time, the county will be involved in that, and they will, at this point, looks like they will be paying 34%. 34%, you're probably wondering of what would be the flow that the wastewater plant treats coming from the county. So they'll take an average of what they treat on a year and break that down. And that would constitute the 34% of what the county is charged for this assessment.
So we're under contract with the county to provide studies for the plant. Our 2004, 2003 contract that we signed with the county to purchase, in essence, they're purchasing flow, the ability to send us flow. And currently, with roughly the last year, they're about 34% of our daily flow. That fluctuates, that's why the contract says kind of a yearly basis. I don't have anything in writing from the county, but we're working on it. It's kind of hard to connect with people this time of the year with vacations and holidays and things, but we do have a commitment from the county, a verbal commitment, because we have a contract with the county. Currently, the county sends us a little over $400,000 a year. Yeah, $400,000 a year for the 2004 construction, the expansion of the wastewater plant. So, which is about half of what our financing was.
And so with this, what's on the agenda, then we're moving forward with the assessment. The new information on the assessment then, and the contract is that the county would be chipping in 34%?
Correct.
Of the, okay.
Of the base price for the study is $160,000. There was other items as a menu style proposal, pick and choose. Bill and I discussed there's certain things we're not going to exercise right now, but the base of 160 is what we will. That's what the county would be pitching in toward. Again, there's a rate study that we want to do. County said no, they won't pay for it because they've done their own rate study.
Will we, Rob, I'll ask the question for you, but will we see the contract then by the next meeting for the assessment?
I'm hoping we will see a commitment from them. Again,
Okay.
we have a contract, and yes, I can.
But who's actually doing the assessment?
CT, was that the?
CT,
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
CT.
CT Consultants.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Yes, CT Consultants.
So that's already in place. This is just working it out with the county to make sure they're going to pay their fair share. Is that kind of what?
Yeah, so we brought it, I have to think about this because it's been a few months. So we solicited qualifications,
Right.
and we chose CT as the most qualified to perform this assessment. They submitted a proposal 3 months later, and that's basically where we're at. And then the question, will the county be involved? That took a little bit of time to decide, to determine, discover. So the county has committed. We don't have it in writing, although we have a contract that says they're going to. I still feel more comfortable for them putting a dollar figure down. This is what they're gonna.
So that's what this
start.
action item is working it out with the county.
This is moving it forward to, I don't have the tracking sheet in front of me, but
There's not one in here.
there's not one in there? Okay.
No.
Well, it should be authorize the mayor to enter contract with CT Consultants.
Oh,
I think that's where we left it
Yeah,
before we
right.
actually saw the contract.
That's what it should be, but. I
but
thought
you
there
said
was a tracking-
you want some sort of written agreement with the county.
I want to, yes, I want a better.
So that's
written
two
agreement.
different things.
So there, I agree. And I'm not sure what Billy submitted. That's why I'm kind of
Okay.
at a loss. I thought he did a tracking sheet a few months ago. Was that authorizing the mayor to enter a contract? Okay.
Yes, and
So
I
that
think we
tracking
held
sheet.
it off because we didn't have the contract to review.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where
Okay, so
it
we'll get
stood.
that to
And
you
then I
guys.
guess we'll need to add something, whether it's an MOU or an actual contract with the county for their part.
Great. Okay. We'll iron this out.
Okay, if there are any other comments, then utility meeting will be adjourned at 6:32.
Oh, we got somebody this hand.
Oh, Lou, would you step up to,
I'd like you to use the microphones that are in front of you. Some of you are not talking into the mics, and it doesn't, I can't hear you back here. Even if I go to the front row, I still can't hear you, because you're not talking into the mics. Thank you.
I think he adjourned.
I was making sure my mic was on.
Right, I think you're up.
Okay, yeah. Okay, it is 6:30, and I'm going to call Public Health and Safety Committee to order. Can you hear me okay, Lou? Am I loud enough? You can't hear me?
Be a little clearer. You can talk more into the mic.
It's right in front of me,
I think,
Now it's better.
I guess.
he was probably referring to moving it closer.
All
That's-
right, well, move it closer. I just want to, can you guys hear me back there? You're okay? Okay, just want to make sure, sound check. Okay, 6:30, I want to call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda is Firehouse Sub Grant. We have done this in the past. This is something that we apply for. Many of you know the Firehouse Subs chain. They are generous and they try to give money away to fire departments, and if we do receive the grant, there is no match. It is for equipment, is generally what it's used for. Have we been successful in the past for that?
It's been a couple of years.
I remember in the past as
They
we're,
open it quarterly.
yeah. So it comes and goes, but we, do our efforts to apply for it, so. Is everyone okay with that, to move that forward?
Absolutely.
Okay. The next item on the agenda, the 3-year maintenance agreement, that one, I believe, we can take this off the agenda. Am I correct?
I believe, and Chelsea, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's in the budget. We
It's
do not
already
need
done.
a separate contract for
Yes.
it, yeah.
So this is nothing that needs to come before council. It was put on an accident. Next item is the uniform motor vehicle towing charges, and this was brought to us by Chief Wallace. And I actually think this is a great idea. When he told me about it, I think this is something that needs to be looked at, and I give him credit for being diligent and looking out for our residents. This kind of, I think, helps people from being taken advantage of. If Chief Wallace, if you want to talk about this a little bit, he included some information about different towing companies.
So in the package, there are the tow companies that we use, and they all have different prices. And so we've had some complaints about people that have had law enforcement tows, and when they go pick them up, the bill is pretty expensive. So we started looking at the tow companies and what they charge, and So I knew that Kent has an ordinance that kind of sets the prices at certain limits, and they can't, so if you look at the different tow companies, they have different different minimums for stuff, and I think that by setting a set price and being able to negotiate with them yearly or every couple of years would be a good thing, because it would set the price and not allow them to gouge people inadvertently. So,
I've heard stories in the past
Right.
of different towing companies that have, kind of held people at ransom for prices that are completely astronomical, and, you get in a situation sometimes that you can't control, or you messed up and you can't get your car because you can't afford it.
Yep.
So, Jeff, where did you want to set this?
well, this is just for discussion, so what I would do is I would come back with an actual policy, and we would kind of look at these prices and kind of go in and kind of compare what the services are and what we actually need, so.
And this is something that your expertise, I would think, would kind of guide this.
Right.
Versus, you come to us on, because I don't know that we as council have the expertise on something like this where you guys are dealing with this on a daily basis.
Yeah, we would just want to set an ordinance, or have an ordinance so that there is a set price, and almost enter into contract with each tow company. So if somebody wanted to come in and do towing, which we get quite often, there would be a company that wants to come and tow for us, they would have to agree to these prices, and we would enter in a contract with them, and we would bring it to council.
So we'd be able to control the prices they charge.
A question on that. Would it be, are you looking at an ordinance that lists all these different prices? Because as you go through it, it's like the accident call is this much, and if it uses the lift, it's this much. If it's cleanup, it's this much, except if there's more oil on the ground, a lot of different details. Do you anticipate listing all of those in the ordinance, or saying in the ordinance that these towing charges are what's set by the police department, and that way
Yeah.
we wouldn't be having to adjust it every year when the prices change?
And we talked about that, because over time, in a couple of years, prices can go up as far as what they would need to charge somebody. But I think kind of similar to what we do with the fire contracts, where we negotiate the price and those are set, and then we bring those forward, and then you guys vote on those. So yes, to your point, I think we would not have the prices in the ordinance, but just the agreed upon contract based on what we set and the contract that we enter into.
So the ordinance we have here from Kent has a lot of prices in there.
It does.
And I guess my question, though, is how would a resident know what to expect if it's not in the ordinance?
Well, there would be a contract, so we would have a contract with the same prices with all of the tow companies. So we can list that somewhere, whatever those prices were, we could put that out somewhere.
Okay.
You could even be on the
Do-
website.
Most people don't read the ordinances, no offense, anyway.
Does the city, and this is just for vehicles that are towed from, like, public places?
Accidents, if there's
Well, but I mean, there are some cities that will enforce parking on private property. We don't do that, right?
No.
Okay. I just want to make sure, somebody parks illegally and
Right.
Wendy's or whatever and gets towed, they're not going to come to the city for,
And if something like that happened, like, I know what you're speaking of, because I've seen it where there will be a sign in a parking lot. When Starbucks was at the other location, they had a sign, no parking, and the tow trucks would just come in and they're cleaning out the parking lot. Now, we make every reasonable effort to contact the owner of the vehicle if that was the case. If we got a complaint about private parking, or a private property parking, and the vehicle was abandoned, we would try to make every attempt to,
if it was abandoned.
or just like.
But you don't
suspicious.
enforce private
No,
property parking?
no.
Okay, yeah, that's what I figured anyway. And do we have a facility like Kent does?
We don't. And
I didn't think so.
in the ordinance, in Kent's ordinance, it talks about the tow companies actually being in the city, I don't think there aren't any of the tow companies that are actually physically in the city that have a tow yard, but
Right.
they're local enough where it's not a problem.
Okay. But at this point, there's nothing in front of us to
Correct.
take action on.
This is just to see if you were interested in going to the next step and letting the police department, develop a draft, because they are seeing a problem. They've had, customers, residents, that have been, kind of abused on pricing.
Even if you
Gouged.
look at the price sheets that are attached, the variances in the prices from the different companies, pretty crazy.
But even then, from that price, they will gouge it up.
Oh, yeah.
From a different price. So it's kind of, Larry, go ahead.
When you're selling a 123 North Walnut, I would just suggest you also negotiate storage prices. If they keep a car several days, some of them charge by the day.
Thank you. Okay.
Quick-
Go
Can
ahead.
I ask a quick question, somewhat related, but not quite? When do you make the determination, so we just had Art on Main Saturday, and I was there at 6 in the morning, and there was a car there overnight. When do you make the after the signs have been posted? So if Balloon Affair is coming up, or I think the Rocks event is, Ravenna Rocks is Saturday, when do you make the determination when you tow a vehicle?
So, more so, I can speak on the Balloon Affair. When we used to, the notices get sent out, they have to be off the street by a certain amount or a certain time, and then when the vendors, the streets close, and usually when the streets close that's when and it's usually early in the morning, that's for the Balloon Affair, that's when we would start towing vehicles. But again, we run the plate, try to get contact with the people, and make an attempt to so they can move the vehicle before we have to tow it.
So just for the organizers then, if they're at the event, signs are up,
Yeah,
cars there, they make the call to the police department, and then you just,
yeah.
okay.
And most of the events are really good about notifying people in a timely manner so that they know in advance. And a lot of times, the downtown parking during the week, in the weekend, that's when you see the residents parking in the street. So it's usually the events that are on the weekend where there's the issue of vehicles that might get left out overnight.
Thanks.
Okay, are we okay on my committee to go ahead and go with the next step for that?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, Jeff, thank you for bringing that. Since I still am talking to you before I go to the next item, do you just want to go ahead? I know everyone received the email from Jeff in regards, but I just want to say how excited I was to see that Ravenna Police Department is on the cutting edge of technology. We have a new way of doing 911 calls. Our dispatch is ahead of other dispatch locally, and I think that's something to commend our department about, and kind of sets us differently from other dispatch centers. Jeff, do you want to just real briefly on this?
So there was an article in the Porger this morning, and it was about our Prepared Live. And what Prepared Live is, it allows our dispatchers, it's a software program that's free. I think there is a paid service for it, but what it does is it allows the dispatcher to send somebody that calls 911 a link, and they can choose to accept the link or not. They ask first, they'll send the link, and if they click on the link, then what that does is that allows us to see and hear what's going on through the camera and microphone. And that helps, especially a lot of times we get people that don't know where they're at and trying to report a crime, or they're in crisis and they need help. That helps with, and so
can it be
for-
recorded too?
Yeah, it's recorded. So it's recorded, and we can use that if we need it for evidence. But I was approached sometime early at the beginning of the year, and our dispatch coordinator, who saw this used at other places in Pennsylvania, and I think there's quite a few places over the country that use it. None, I think maybe one place in Summit County, but we talked about it, and it sounded like a great way to enhance our operation, and it helps the dispatcher get a good idea of what's going on. So when they're connected, they can kind of gather more information if they need to about a situation where somebody may not be able to talk. They can hear things and see things that the person may not be able to communicate with. So they can also text, which is good. If somebody couldn't talk, they would be able to text information back and forth to the person.
And it's all traceable too, so.
Right.
Okay, thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And tell your coordinator, great job. That's exciting news to hear. Okay, next item on the agenda is the ordinance to accept the State of Ohio EMS grant for purchase of EMS equipment, and it's for the amount of $731.33. Is that correct?
Correct.
No match, just accepting the money. Everyone okay with that?
Good.
Okay. All right. We will move that forward. Anything else to come before public health and safety? All right. I'm going to adjourn at 6:45. Thank you.
At 6:45, I'll call to order the Planning Committee meeting. We have one item on the agenda and probably won't take very long. It's just a continuing discussion about a possible ordinance limiting the number of dogs. Not at our last regular meeting, but the meeting before, we had a resident come to us concerned about a specific property where he had an incident and questioned whether or not or why the city didn't have an ordinance limiting the number of dogs somebody could have on their property. We did talk about this last month, and I mentioned there are some cities, Canton, Stowe, I forget the third one, that have ordinances that limit the number of dogs. None in Portage County. And I did a little more research on the topic as well, and find it difficult to actually come to some reasonable ordinance. One problem is when you make an ordinance like this, limiting the number of dogs because it's a nuisance, courts have pretty much overruled those ordinances in court. I guess the basic premise is you can't measure a nuisance by the number of dogs you have. You could have 5 perfectly well-behaved dogs and somebody else could have 1. That's a bit of a nuisance, and so you can't make those judgments in the form of an ordinance. But you can, the courts have upheld ordinances that restrict the number as a public health and safety issue. And again, just sort of interpreting how that might work is if you think about having a certain number of dogs, the more dogs you have, the more, let's say, waste you have, the more other safety potential issues that could crop up. So if you just had an ordinance that said residents could only have no more than 5 adult dogs to ensure the safety and health of, city residents, that would probably be upheld. But I think the fundamental question we have to ask is, do we even want to do this? And I'm inclined to say no. I mean, I understand this situation that happened with this one residence. And the truth is, the other thing that would be hard to enforce is putting something in place now when somebody already has X number of dogs.
You can't go back.
Yeah, courts don't really like that sort of targeted restriction, as if we're doing something to that specific resident. So I don't know, I wanted to make sure everyone else had a chance to weigh in. We all know what the issue was with this one incident, whether or not we want to engage in an ordinance that would limit the number of dogs. Another aspect of it is enforcement. Who gets to enforce an ordinance like this? The city police, the dog warden. It's a bit of a question. And regardless of who does it, how does it get enforced is another issue. I'm inclined to think that we kind of should leave things the way they are. And there are other aspects of this. The chief sent me at the beginning of the meeting the list of dog bites. Well, that's really not what we're talking about, but it's good to know. I mean, if someone is bitten by a dog, we already have ordinances. We have experience in how to deal with that. So this is strictly about whether or not we should just, and I could almost put the word arbitrarily in front of it, limit the number of dogs.
I think that particular issue is something more so a property maintenance type issue. I mean, it's the location of the dogs. And we don't have an ordinance that says dogs cannot be placed, the positioning of where these dogs are put in the front yard with the amount of dogs, the size of the area, and the size of the fence. And the fence, to my knowledge, wasn't even, approved to be put there to begin with. And it is a rental property. I think this particular case, we have residents and people walking by, and the male people who are being victimized by this one house. And it's true, the amount of dogs, if we were to try to enforce that or do that ordinance, that particular person would be grandfathered in, because it wouldn't go back, you can't create an ordinance and then have someone say, okay, now you have to get rid of all your animals because we've created that. So I think this particular problem is a menace to that particular area and to the neighbor. I mean, nobody should have to be afraid to go outside in their yard for fear that they're going to be, attacked or bitten or walk by that house. I did talk to the humane officer. I've talked to the dog warden. Limiting, again, the amount of animals, they were not in favor of, because that also puts, it limits for the dog rescues that we have in our community. We do have some, very good people that do have some dog rescues, and that help clean out the pound. And it penalizes the people, like Rob said, you could have one dog that could be, ruining, your neighborhood, and you could have someone that has 4 and 5 dogs that you wouldn't even know lived in the house. But this particular one, I think you figure out a way to go after property maintenance, and I think maybe we come up with an ordinance on, you can't place animals in your front yard. I mean, on a size, I don't know if there's ordinances out there already that have where animals cannot be stored in your front yard on the amount of animals that this person has, the size of the animals that he has, and how small that front yard is and the size of the fence. I mean, is that a way to go about this particular way? I mean, I do feel terrible for the guy next door, because, he's afraid to go on the side of his house when these dogs are out. I mean, he's already been bit once, and it's an unfortunate situation, but, how do we, the city, protect other people from walking by that area too?
Or anyone, anywhere else in the city doing something similar, or having their dogs chained up out front. I mean, I would think that we could adjust the leash law somehow.
Yeah, we don't
the
have
zoning.
a leash law, but these dogs are not on leashes. They're running free. So
Right, no, I'm saying, but we could start with addressing that, just like a leash law, where if they're gonna be unattended and outside, they need to be the rear of the property, they need to be, not within so many feet of the sidewalk. Something, and I'm not saying that any of those are the right solution, but we can address it in that
a
way.
different way.
I would rather do something general that would cover anywhere in the city
Right.
that a similar situation could happen, rather than just singling out a certain nuisance property.
And then it was addressed, there was no police report filed after the individual was bit.
Yeah, he chose to do that. That
Yeah.
was his choice.
Yes, I remember that, but what I'm saying is, it would seem like someone would want to file that after an incident like that.
The only, and I'm not saying I did an exhaustive study of this,
I know you.
but the only community that has zoning-based restrictions is Stowe, where, I can't remember the exact number, you can have a certain number of dogs, it might be 4 or so, and then any number above that, you had to account for 4,000 square feet of property for each dog. And it's an interesting approach. again, we're talking about limiting the number of dogs you can have, and I think that's where we get into this enforcement problem. I mean, I suppose you could look at a tax map and see how many square footage a property has, and then you can go out and count dogs on a property.
Well, I'm not even talking about dogs, the number. I'm talking about being able to store your animal in the front yard in general. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know that I don't
don't-
know that you're going to find any ordinances in existence that do that.
I don't know.
And again, the nature of properties, someone could have only a front yard, right, or a very limited backyard. I don't know.
It's a tricky situation, it really is.
I think it's similar to the trash cans. You can't let them live in your front yard. They have to be behind the building property line. I mean,
We should copy the trash can ordinance and just replace the word trash can with dogs.
I just,
I'm joking.
I look at it for the safety and health of the rest of the residents.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to walk your toddler down a street around the block on the sidewalk, which you're teaching them to appropriately use the sidewalk, then you should be able to do that without putting yourself or your child at risk of getting bit.
We do, just to jump in, we do have 61801, so there's animals running at large. That's the ordinance on the books now, that public running around does not address the zoning items that we were discussing. What I brought up with the biting, I guess, is the end result that in whether the individual files a police report or goes to the hospital, in both instances, the dog warden is somehow notified. And then he does the investigation with those 7 bullet points on the front of his website at the county website. And just like Amy said, I spoke with Mr. McIntyre too. He said, give council my cell phone. So if we had any questions directly for him, you could ask him. But he did, one of the questions I asked was, comparing to Stowe or Canton with limiting the number of dogs. He made it very clear that nobody no city in Portage County currently has a cap on the number of dogs.
Nor do they have a leash law in Portage County. And that's what the APL humane officer told me too.
We reached out to the resident, the renter, and she will move the fence back 2 feet. She will get a fence permit, and she will move the fence back 2 feet. The type of fence can be 4 feet high because it's open, but that was one of the specific reasons that I wrote the fence had to be 2 feet from the right-of-way, which is in essence 2 feet from the sidewalk.
What about the side property line? Does the fence?
No, I did not. I didn't specify a distance from the property line.
Okay,
I just tell the residents they have to be able to maintain it.
yeah.
The specific lot has no backyard because they paved the parking lot right up almost to the back door. That's something we would never allow. And I would believe that those dogs would be in the rear of the yard if they had a rear yard. If there was some way to fix that, we'd fix it, but I don't expect the owners are going to cut out a few parking spaces and put a yard back for that house. But it's the same owners that own the license bureau and driving, they own that whole compound, and that house is part of that parking lot.
Did she give you a time frame when this was?
July is what she told Dawn Rose.
Do you know if you reached out to the resident that was concerned about this?
I don't know if Dawn did or not.
Or has the owner been contacted and involved at all? Because I would think that as a property owner,
Right.
even if it's a rental, if something, a more vicious dog bite or somebody that does want to report it or needs medical attention, the liability would go on the homeowner.
So I believe it's a property management company in
It
Pittsburgh.
is.
The only thing I was going to mention, Rob, was I believe the fact pattern on this, the fence was right at the sidewalk. As he was walking along the sidewalk, he stumbled. The hand went over the fence into the other side, and that's when the bite occurred. The dog wasn't loose out over the fence biting him. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, that's the way he described it when he was here.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're moving the fence back
Yeah.
anyway, so,
The other question I was going to have is,
yeah.
given that specific situation, is there nuisance ordinances that would cover that? Or
Only
not?
for barking dogs.
For noise,
I
it would
believe.
be?
Yeah.
But
Like
nothing
an-
else?
Well, what else, what do you mean?
Health and safety?
I don't know. That's a good question. I really don't know, to be honest.
That whole 61818 has vicious, I would just go through that.
Yeah, okay.
It has vicious animals in there. There's quite a bit, but, sorry, I'll
Name
defer.
and,
Carmen Lodato, 222 Madison Street. I was kind of thinking along the lines, what does the Ohio Revised Code say? And they do have a lot of language on this, actually. But it would involve somebody, it would involve the police, and it would be a charge that if you have a dog, it has to be, it can't be in an open area, it has to be restrained in some way. And this is the state language on it. It says whoever violates the subsection is guilty of a minor misdemeanor, so that would be police action taken. And I don't know, I wasn't here the last time the person didn't want to call the police.
That's correct.
Felt bad for the dogs.
yeah.
Okay, I mean, I guess
But-
from my perspective, if they're not willing to involve the police, then why would this city waste its time
Well-
writing a policy or a new law?
I don't think the resident was as much concerned about his experience as his sort of realization that, you know, the city didn't have any restrictions on the number of dogs in a confined small area. He thought common sense tells us, you know, you don't have, and by the way, they were pit bulls, correct? So, I mean, that's also plays into it, whether you believe pit bulls are more dangerous or whatever, that's another, and we don't restrict
Right.
by breed, most, and a lot of places don't.
Well,
But I'm just saying, his concern was more about the number of dogs, that there was such a small, and it was in his neighborhood, that's, when he said, why shouldn't the city have some restrictions on the number of dogs people can have?
Well, if you're interested in the ORC section, it's 505.01. I
But-
mean, and just in case there's ever a problem with cattle, horses, swine, sheep, geese, ducks, goats, turkeys, and chickens,
That'd be a
that's also in there. But it
Right.
does say that no owner, keeper, harbor of any dog or cat shall fail at any time to keep it either physically confined or restrained upon the premises of the owner, keeper, or harborer by a leash, tether, adequate fence, supervision, or secure enclosure to prevent escape. And so the only thing that's in the ORC is that two things can happen, either charged with a minor misdemeanor, or they can actually order that the owner put the dog through obedience training.
And there's,
Yeah.
in addition to that,
But there is something on
yeah,
there,
section 955 is the other one, that
yeah.
if you read through that, that's everything from the registration to law enforcement to the
But
dog warden.
that's our code. She's talking about Ohio
Ours.
Revised Code.
Well, that's what I'm pointing to, 955
Oh, Ohio
the
Revised
ORC,
Code?
just specific to dogs,
Oh, okay.
so.
And if you, I don't know which code is in, but there's nothing in the Ohio Revised Code that has anything to do with the number of dogs.
No.
But there is a line, and I don't know which part of the code, that says local municipalities can enact their own ordinances to restrict dogs. And it doesn't say, so in other words, there is, the Ohio legislature does grant cities the ability to limit by number or breed, I believe, but that would be up to us if we wanted to do that. And that's kind of really what I'm trying to get from people. I mean, what is your opinion, for example? Should the city limit the number of dogs a person can have?
No,
Okay.
I think you guys have better things to do with your resources and time.
Well, look, somebody had a concern, and I think there was a lot of legitimacy to what he was saying, and a lot of common sense tells you this resident was a little bit out of the ordinary, right? And maybe it was partially his own negligence or whatever, I don't know.
I would be personally angry if me or one of my kids or something was bit
Right.
by a dog and somebody previously bitten didn't follow through with law
Well-
enforcement, because then that causes problems for me, because you have to establish things about that dog, because you can have your dog taken away from you. I know this because it
Oh, I
happened
know.
to my mom. She
Yeah,
was
yeah.
a mentor. They weren't playing around.
Right.
And as soon as there was an issue documented twice with the same dog, then she had to surrender the dog.
Right. Or
So-
sometimes they have to be in, put certain pens, there has to be a bond and all this other onerous stuff.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for your input, I appreciate it. Does anybody, I guess the simple question, does anybody think we should, and just in the limited question about restricting the number of dogs, that's really all I wanted to talk about. I mean, there's a lot of related issues to dogs and nuisances and whether they're violent and bite and so forth. But does anybody think we should limit the number of dogs a resident can have? Because if not, I think we can kind of put this to rest.
I'll say no.
Okay. So I'm kind of reluctant to go down some weird sort of zoning dog, ordinance, similar to trash cans or whatever, because I just think we're going to get into the same strange area we were with trash cans, trying to sort it out when we have such a variety of lots and dogs and I don't know. So I kind of want to just move on. And I do think the point, just like the point was made with trash cans, I think we do have ordinances on the books. We have history of dealing with dog bites and so forth. We should hope that residents take advantage of those existing ordinances before we go crafting new ones. What's that?
Well, Brian, sorry, but
It's okay.
when Rob's done, I didn't know, this is tracking sheet was here, I think in our packet. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about the budget, but Rob, you could.
Oh, you want to
wrap
add
up.
that to
Sorry,
the agenda? That could be
I-
your management update.
It was here, so I don't know if it was, if we were
I
supposed to.
thought it was, but I thought it was for the committee of the whole.
Okay,
Yeah, that's what we ended up deciding. Just to kind of let people know, we will be talking about it next meeting, and then
Okay.
potentially try to pass it at the July meeting, the tax budget. We did have our budget commission meeting already, and we've been going through that, so I'll give you an update next week.
Okay, anything else? Then at